My name's Chris Webb, Head of Communications at the CW. Delighted to be joined by our General Secretary, Dave Hall.
Hi, everybody.
And our Deputy General Secretary, Postal, Martin Walsh. How are you doing, guys?
Yeah, good. Hi, everyone.
First thing I should say to members is this is a recorded session. So comments and stuff like that, we won't be picking them up. You should have seen about an hour ago that a written update's gone out as well. So we're trying to make sure we cover all bases, really. There's plenty of information out there for you in both of written content. But we wanted to sit down and talk to Dave and talk to Martin because we recognise, I'll come to you first if I can, Dave. I recognise, obviously, members are frustrated. There is I've picked up a new entrance comment last night saying they were like 20 or 30 pence above the minimum wage. There's desperation here as well with things like pay and the equalisation terms and conditions. There's been several deadlines set which we haven't been able to achieve agreement on. So I guess, rather than a Friday talks continue, we thought it was time to come out and give the members a bit more information, and you guys both obviously led that. So I guess, first of all, Dave, I'll give you a chance to frame where are we sort of question,
Yeah, so, I think the first thing to say is we understand that the members, will be frustrated that we haven't yet reached a full agreement. But I think everybody's got to recognise that we're trying to shift the whole ethos of the company. We're trying to get good pay deals. We're trying to end the chaos that's taking place in the workplace. There's major negotiations going on about the USO reform, obviously subject to any decisions that Ofcom make. And, there's loads of other stuff that flows from the agreement that we reached on the 12th of December. And Martin and the team have made some real progress here. Martin will cover some of that. The other encouraging point is that EP, the people that we did the original deal, obviously, our members may have seen that the board resigned on a couple of days back now, and EP are effectively in control, and they are now also part of the negotiations on an ongoing basis, where we have a review with EP pretty much on a daily basis. So we see that as a positive development, which we believe will help speed it up towards a final agreement. I think the other thing that I would say is that people have got to realise that the previous board, right up until the point they resigned, have done pretty much everything they can to destabilise the situation. This is the nature of that board. This is what we've been talking about for months and months and months. And frankly, the way they've behaved, from the chair, Keith Williams, down to other board members and some managers in the company, continues, to have sort of destroyed almost the basis of how Royal Mail operates. So there's a huge job to do here to put this right. And, I think people have got to be patient because the deal can be so big. Obviously, with regard to your point about new entrants, we're fully aware of that, but that's down to Royal Mail. Royal Mail themselves imposed new entrants terms. It's been an absolute disaster, as we said it would be, and the negotiations that Martin and the team are involved in are going to create a pathway to equalising new entrants terms and conditions.
Thanks, Dave. I'm going to come straight back if I can to you, and I'll open up to mine. A couple of things. One, the members, you said there really. One would be timelines, because I think, we don't want to put ourselves in a corner here because, several times when we've said we're looking to agree an agreement by a certain date, and then the members line up as you would expect because they need to pay, they want to know about the new entrance terms, they want to know about things like VR and stuff like that. Can you give a bit more detail when we're looking to conclude without, obviously putting the union in the corner? And you talked about, when I was reading the social media pages yesterday and some of the emails that were coming into the union, you talked a little bit about the actions of the previous board. And I guess I wanted to put on the table for your view of those actions continuing, because there is a truth out there that the chaos continues, that there's still a prioritisation of parcels over letters, and there still is basically, absolute chaos in our units, and Royal Mail are obviously continuing to play that down. So although it is good, and members will be heartened to see some of those exits, they're probably going to want to see some more,
Yeah, I think there's no point in hiding away from this. What we're seeing is that ethos is deeply entrenched I think the members see that in their managers, in their own workplaces. I think our reps at various levels of the business see that in the actions of managers that they interface with. And you can't do what the previous board did, where they completely infected, in our view, sort of employee relations, damaged them, damaged morale with their actions. You can't do that and turn that off overnight. I think the fear is, and we've seen this, is that some of these managers are really struggling to even accept the words that EP have already agreed. And we are looking for EP to put that right, And if those managers can't accept that employees need to be put back at the heart of everything the company does, and customers need to be the absolute priority, then they shouldn't be working for Royal Mail. And we will be looking for EP to move those managers on as and when we come across those managers. I think there are lots of managers, sadly, that fall into that category. And that's why this is such a difficult job to do. With timelines, I'm not going to box ourselves in the sense of, we don't want to then have to give another update, in a couple of days' time. But of course, we're looking to try and finalise this, perhaps in the next week. But the reality is EP takeover, their first board meeting, I think, is on Tuesday, the 9th of June. And, if we were able to move this forward over the weekend with Martin and the team and involvement where necessary with EP, then, hopefully they'll be going to that board meeting ready to endorse an agreement.
Thanks, Dave. Some of the specifics, Martin, if I can. Pay, first of all, because the update from yourself and Dave earlier on obviously let members know that we've rejected multiple offers, including one in the in and around the 4% area. Now, a couple of questions on that. Some more detail I think would be good, but there will be a group of members going, I'll accept that. So why haven't you put it to me? Why can't I have a vote on it? So that's one element of it. And there'll be another group of members, I'm sure, saying that's well short of our aspirations. But a little bit of detail in and around the pay, and I guess specifically the point of why we haven't come out up to now with that figure.
Look, it's always difficult when you're in negotiations. Some of these are closed offers. So coming out and giving reports to people on what those numbers are isn't in line with negotiations. So that's why we haven't revealed it. What we've tried to be open is we've rejected now 7 offers. The last one was over 4% from April, and we're determined to get a better deal. And the other thing where I've noticed people saying, well, we don't want a long-term deal. One of the things within the EP agreement was to build stability, to build a platform for growth. There would have to be a long-term deal. What we're trying to get to is it's in line with inflation for years 2 and 3, with a reopener clause, and also there'd be other things around the employment benefit trust, where any profit, the first 10% goes back into that trust for employees, and there'd be a performance incentive scheme which will give further money based on local targets. So look, we are determined to get a pay rise which is as good as we can, and we've rejected those offers. We will get to a point where if we get the right pay rise, it will be for the executive and then the members to decide if that's good enough.
Interesting point you made there, and I'll put it back to you, and maybe Dave, you might want to come in as well on this point, because I have seen, as you say, some people saying, let's just do a 1-year deal. And I guess, all sort of points you've made, but an additional one would be that we have seen such levels of chaos in the industry and instability that, surely it is time to give people some certainty around their jobs and around their pay and around their futures. Is that some of the thinking as well, Martin?
Yeah, of course it is. If you look at where we were a few years ago, we've lost track of either CPI or RPI. And I think having a link to those inflation at least gives people security. With a reopener clause, if inflation is below, we're saying 2%, there'd be a reopener clause. And it's also based on how profitable the company is going to be in years 2 and year 3. So yes, I think a long-term deal in this environment with the change of the USO is probably in the best way we can get to, Chris.
Dave, I know you always, Martin, are interested, want to communicate really honestly with our members in a really straightforward way. I think in line with that, basic pay over the last, say, 7 or 8 years has fallen backwards, I would say, in terms of we made some real big steps 10 years plus ago in basic pay and made lots of consolidations into basic pay. And I think in the last 7 or 8 years, that has taken a back step. Is that in the thinking as well? Is the need to, arrest that decline, I guess, and get going in the upward direction?
Without a doubt. And I think Martin and the team have made it clear to the company that we've got to start building basic pay back up to a decent level. And I think you're right, in 7 or 8 years, we haven't really done as well on pay as what we were doing. And we now have a gap that I think effectively has devalued the role of a postal worker's job. If you add into that the actions of the employer, the imposing of new entrants' terms and conditions, just their general attitude in the workplace, and now they've made it really, really difficult for people trying to drive out long-term employees. They've created a really difficult situation. They've got to own up to that. And one of the things we're trying to do, when Martin talks about stability, and we both believe, and all of the officers and the union believe, that getting stability is a positive for our members. But that stability has to be based on a totally different approach of how the company will run each delivery office, where the workers have a greater say over the day-to-day operation. That's what we agreed with EP Group. We believe EP Group want to introduce that change in culture. We have no doubt that they want to do it. The problem is, quite frankly, even in some of these talks, we can see from the way that Royal Mail are trying to avoid owning up to certain issues, and the way that you draft agreements, trying to protect their reputations more than actually move the company forward. And that's disappointing. And that goes back to the earlier point, I would say. I think the other thing that's worth saying here is that in a set of negotiations as complex as what Martin and the team are directly involved in, you can't agree one thing without agreeing everything. And that's another reason why we can't pick out certain bits of information, although Martin has given our members, a really good update there. But you can't do that because you work on the basis of nothing's agreed until everything's agreed.
Thanks. I'm looking for some more really good information, Martin. New entrants, terms and conditions. Obviously, such a big issue for any trade union, two-tier workforce. The potential of division there in the workforce, and that's only going to increase as more and more new entrants come into the industry. And as I said to you earlier on, members coming on in desperation, really pointing out they're only pence above, the minimum wage. An update for those members. I mean, the EP agreement was clear in terms of setting out a pathway to harmonisation. Is that going to be in the agreement?
Yes, it is, Chris. Look, we are looking at an equalisation point. The discussions over how long, and it's really important to understand when Royal Mail imposed these new entrants contracts, the differences between the original contracts. So, for example, they don't get paid meal leaves. Their hours are 40 hours compared to 37, and it's a gross working week on the original contract. So, with 3 hours 40 minutes meal relief paid, whereas a new entrant has to take 3 hours 40 minutes after 40 hours to have a meal leave. So we're looking at reducing the working time for a 40-hour contract by 6 hours 20. And we're also, for part-timers, it's an increase on the hourly rate for every hour we do that. So this is a massive issue. On top of that is they don't get functional supplements. There's only one flat London waiting rate. So the inner London waiting rate is £48 more per week than the current new entrants London waiting range. They don't get recruitment and retention payments. They're not allowed to work scheduled attendance. They're not allowed to have TPM pensionable allowances. They're not covered by MTSF. And they get a nest scheme pension, which is the worst pension scheme completely. So we're trying to equalise them across all of those areas. And of course, there is a cost to all of those elements. But equally, we're saying to Royal Mail there's a cost with recruitment and retention issues by not doing it. So the debate is how quickly you can do it. The EP agreement talked around incremental steps. It's fair to say we want this quicker than the pathway Royal Mail have proposed. And that's one area where we're apart at the moment. We've moved some big issues on there, but there is still a gap in the negotiations on new entrants.
And you guys think you can close that gap?
Yeah, I think we've got to close it. It's in the interest of the company. Again, this is about the previous management owning up to their mistakes, accepting that what they've created is an almost impossible situation for workers locally to deliver for their customers. And, you saw recently with Ofcom announcing yet a further investigation into Royal Mail's quality of service figures, that the only way you're going to solve this problem is to increase the pay terms and conditions as quickly as we can for new entrants. So that is beneficial as well to our existing employees. I think our existing employees who were on what we now call legacy terms understand how unfair that is for new entrants. I think they'll stand with new entrants on that. But I think they'll also recognise that it's part of ending some of the chaos that Royal Mail have created in the workplace, a key part of it.
I want to talk, obviously, we've talked about pay is a massive issue, talked about new entrants, massive issue, and we're going to go on shortly to talk about the future of the industry and the sort of ethos and the industrial relations and employee relations. I want to talk a little bit. There are members who, through this period of change or through what's happened, who are putting their hand up saying, I wouldn't mind leaving the business, who are looking at, once again, the unilateral terms that Royal Mail introduced on voluntary redundancies, vastly changing them from what was the MTSF terms. Any update on improved VR terms?
Yeah, look, again, as Dave said, we have moved forward the voluntary redundancy package, but it's in the same process. Nothing's agreed until everything's agreed. But giving an update, we have moved the amount. We've removed the tapering where anyone over 64 and a half don't get the full terms of voluntary redundancy. We've increased the multiplier and we've increased the minimum. So there is progress on that. And again, there's a balance in all of these. Everything in the package costs. So there's an overall cost to everything. And the negotiations is trying to manage it. We think on the VR voluntary redundancy issue, we are closer on that issue than we are on new entrants and pay at this moment in time.
Thanks, Mike. Dave, I want to talk about the EP agreement, rebuilding Royal Mail, contained within it a really good section on improving employee and industrial relations. I'm assuming this phase of the agreement, if you like, part two, it is going to do so again. I mean, we're going back to the point about, prioritisation of mail, USO favours, the culture in the workplaces, Royal Mail down dialing that, Royal Mail misreporting that in some cases in terms of failures. Questions about the USO, which I'll come on to in my next segment to Martin, in terms of the pilots and the process, and their arrogance, if you like, in terms of almost treating it like a fait accompli in some of their communications. How serious are the words in this agreement going to be on resetting relations? And more important than the words, are you confident they'll be followed through in actions?
Well, I think they're both really good points. The words need to be clear. They need to be based on actions that follow on from the EP agreement. And the consistent thing that Martin and the team have encountered with the management who were under the control of the previous board, who resigned last week, is that they've clearly been trying to water down, virtually in each section, the commitments that were made by the EP group and us. And that's been really disappointing. And I think it came as probably a surprise to EP group as well. So that's why we're trying to put that right now by getting the process stronger with EP group themselves and us reviewing the progress that's being made on a daily basis. But following through on it is the crucial thing. Members won't believe anything we or Royal Mail say if they don't see it change in their workplace. And I've got to say, when you talk to Royal Mail managers at a senior level, I think some of them seem almost deluded about the scale or as though they're doing well at the moment, that they're trying their hardest and they, that's not what our members see. And I think they've got to accept that they've made mistakes. And the only way you show the employees that you've made mistakes in that regard, with some of the actions that the board introduced unilaterally, is by, following through and making managers sign up to that new ethos. And, the unfortunate thing at the moment is we can all see, and a lot of our reps tell us pretty much every day of the week, that they ain't seeing that change in their managers. And I've got to say, some of the managers we talk to don't seem to want to recognise that they got this wrong previously and they've now got to put that culture right. I mean, we weren't talking here just about managers who, have prioritised parcels, over letters. We're talking about managers at the top of the company who lied at a select committee. And I think it's fairly obvious that at some point, because Ofcom are reinvestigating Royal Mail's quality of service, that Parliament will want to look at that again as well. And we'd certainly welcome another select committee, which might enable us as well to explain how we're trying to work with EP Group and how we're trying to put these things right, as well as, making it very clear to Parliament about some of the problems again that have been continuing since the last time they had Royal Mail in front of a select committee.
Thanks, Dave. Martin, I want to talk to you about the USO, not sort of intrinsically linked to Section 5 of the EP agreement, but, basically there was obviously the link in so much that the ambition is that we reach agreement on all these things at the same time. USO is so multifaceted, the questions, because from the members we're seeing from the workplaces online and elsewhere. First of all would be a view that the pilots are not working, I guess, is spilling on. And I guess, so a chance for you to, give us some more details, where they are working, where they aren't working, where we're putting the fixes in, I think. But moreover, and perhaps more importantly, is that at the start of the process, I think Dave, yourself, Tony Booch, Davey and the other officers were quite clear that, it will take an agreement from the union before we move this forward. And the actions from Royal Mail recent weeks haven't really matched that with, masses of planning before we finished any of the pilots. With on one of their websites, there was a leak around, them just ploughing ahead with some of this in July, regardless of the Ofcom decision. Now, they've been rebuked this week by Ofcom, who've made it clear that no decisions have been made and they can't be moving ahead without that. So I guess an overall update from you on USO, but picking up those points as well, where, perhaps that is a further indication of the continuing bad faith from some of those Royal Mail leaders.
Look, let's start from the position of why USO reform is necessary. The chaos which have been in place in delivery offices since COVID, you can see you're never going to restore quality of service. You're never going to have reliable resourcing unless you change to what is going to be an improved quality of service metric. And part of what we're looking at is has to be USO reform. What we haven't signed up to is the job reductions. What we've signed up to, it has to hit Ofcom's quality of service targets. Workload's got to be achievable, fair. There's got to be a reduction in fatigue. There's got to be improved Saturdays off, improved attendances, and it's got to be improved morale and confidence in the workplace. Those are the 4 things which will drive whether we support the optimised delivery model. Now, what's happening out there, let's pick up the pilots. The ones which have been in the longest, the 4 Scottish offices, there are some problems in there. And they were first to be introduced. In Newton Mearns, they're all single-ton vans. They have got a further duty back. That's going to be agreed on Monday. In Cumbernauld, Ayr and Girvan, we've met with Royal Mail this week. There's going to be further talks to resolve those pilots. In Northern Ireland, Antrim, Ballymena, they're working slightly better. There's been a lot more support over there. And there's also issues around parcels over there. Now, all the other pilots have only been deployed the last 3 weeks. And when you give that scale a change, there's always going to be a bedding in period. Some of those are working better than others. And if you look at quality of service, believe it or not, and work plan failures, the average is there's less work plan failures under this system than 4 weeks prior to being deployed. Now, that's not a badge of success because we've got to make sure they hit all the quality figures. But track 24, track 48 are the same. They're achieving the same quality. SD, special delivery items, are less. So that's an issue which, obviously, on average, sick leave is better under the optimised delivery, not in every unit, but on the average across the pilots. But what we do know is the call rate in some of these units are too high. The mail centres aren't holding back some of the non-priority items, so they're landing when they shouldn't be. And on the combined routes, Wednesday to Saturday, when parcels really kick in, some of them can be challenging. Now, we've got, obviously, plans to resolve all those. And what we're saying, there won't be any rollout of further deployment of your ODM, even if Ofcom agrees to sanction it, until we put the pilots right, until we've got a plan to make sure all of those pilots are working. So, look, is USO reform necessary? Yes. Is the optimised delivery model the best out of all the options? Because if you look at where we're around Europe, around the world, most of them are moving to less days, 3 or 4 days. If they move to 3 or 4 days, we would lose thousands of jobs. The optimised delivery model is the best method to use. What we're not signing into is the calculations which Royal Mail have delivered that on. What we're saying, it has to achieve quality, has to have achievable workload, it has to have improved Saturdays and benefits for our members, and it's got improved confidence and morale in the place. And we're going to make sure those pilots do that. There's a plan next week to resolve the Scotland offices, but where there's other problems, we will be resolving those pilot units. Not all of them have been deployed yet. And like I said, 26 of them, I think, have only gone live over the last 3 weeks. So there's a varying degrees of success on those pilots which has just landed.
Thanks, Mike. Excellent update, Dave. I want to. There's some elements, obviously. Negotiations never end, really, I guess. But there's some elements of the agreement with EP Group which were like, such as pay and new entrance term, we're committed to resolving like immediately, if you like, in this set of discussions. There were other elements that were 3 months post-transaction, 6 months post-transaction. In that bracket, things such as like sick pay, overtime and SA rates, reducing agency workers. So, when the members are going to, I guess, be presented ultimately with a document that, has a whole host of resolutions and then some future pathways to resolutions, but a general update on some of those areas?
Yeah, I think that captures it. I think what we're trying to do is look at what we agreed and EP agreed, and in every part of that agreement there was an action that flowed from that. So obviously pay, dealing with the new entrants' terms and conditions, improving various aspects of what Royal Mail have put wrong, frankly. It's all covered in the EP agreement. And what the guys have been doing is taking that section by section and coming up with the action that flows directly from that. And it will either be a resolution to that issue as committed to under the EP agreement, or where the timeline that was in the EP agreement goes on a bit longer, there will need to be some further conversations to get to the action that comes from that. And that will be laid out effectively in our next steps. But all of this can be really positive. And, I think we know that that is a very strong agreement that we reached with EP. I think all of our reps know it, they've seen it. I think the members probably haven't seen it, hasn't been at the forefront of their minds so much, but they're going to get to see the full content of that once that agreement was called Rebuilding Royal Mail. What Martin and the team are effectively negotiating is the part 2 of that solves all of the problems that were listed and gets to all the commitments that were made. I do want to comment on, Martin was just talking about the USO reform, and what is inevitable in the next 2 or 3 years is that we need to make changes within Royal Mail. Not because, we're afraid of change or Royal Mail are imposing change. Forget Royal Mail. Something we always say, and I do hope our members understand this, certainly when you meet them face to face, they do get it. But sometimes I think some of the people who just respond online, if the company doesn't change, and we're going to play a huge part in what that change looks like, using our influence and our expertise, and we want the employees to do the same. If it doesn't change, it doesn't survive. Royal Mail operates today in a permanently changed world of communications, and the whole markets that they operate in are moving away from the traditional letters that used to be the mainstay of Royal Mail's revenue streams to other things that we're going to have to create, greater share in the parcels market, and importantly and crucially, other growth initiatives, not just relying on parcels. And we've got to lead that change. And there is no way, whether EP are here, whether Royal Mail are here, whether it's a current Royal Mail, a newly reinstated Royal Mail who wants to treat their employees better, we're not going to get out of that debate. And USO reform is part of that. And I think the key test there, what Martin highlighted there, and I think they're approaching this in the right way, is Ofcom will make a decision. We've made submissions to Ofcom. Other stakeholders, customers and whatnot, will make submissions to Ofcom. It's Ofcom's decision as to whether or not the model comes in. It's our decision and the company's decision as to how we implement that. And that's the bit where Martin has given, I think a lot of reassurance there to our members that we're not moving beyond the pilots if they're not working. If they don't meet the objectives that, Royal Mail have signed up to, then there would be no point in doing this. Getting this wrong will be a catastrophe for the company. They've already damaged confidence with customers through their previous actions. We have to now work together to get this right. But we are definitely of the view that we're at that point where holding on to the previous type of approach on the USO is actually ultimately going to damage job prospects going forward, and it will certainly not allow Royal Mail as a company to invest in new growth opportunities. So this is the right moment to consider the change. It needs to be done right. And the guys are working extremely hard to get it right, as are our members who are working in the pilots, as are the reps who support those members in the pilots. That work's got to go a long way yet before we're in a place where we can say we've got a product here that can be rolled out everywhere else.
Can you see that you've spoken at such a level, both of you have such a level of gravity, his significance this moment we're in and around the US. So it's a fundamental, generational change in the way we operate in Royal Mail, and as we're trying to take people with us, the employer's announcing dates when it's coming in without agreement. I mean, the undermining of what you've just said there is quite significant in the actions of the employers. And that's what I'm saying about the members will be watching and thinking, like, get that, Dave, get that, Maureen, but they're going to do it anyway, aren't they? I mean, you two are both obviously emphatically saying no, they won't, because they won't be able to. And I think the average member would get that, given the scale of the change. Martin, you were going to say.
Yeah, look, the whole reason why we done the pilots, Chris, and we asked our reps to pick some of the most challenging units because we wanted testing.
Yeah.
And you look at West One in the City of London. Mainly firms outside their postcode, Oxford Street being pedestrianised. There was always going to be challenges. We wanted to test it. There is no way Royal Mail can introduce this successfully by themselves. It can only be done with an agreement with us, and it can only be done with the support of the workforce.
I guess
it's too big a change.
The guess to come back to that is the word you use there, successfully, because they have introduced so much unilaterally and not cared about the success of it, or not cared about the service, or not cared about the impact of employees. So the grip of it for us, if you like, and the control and the involvement is so important, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it is. And look, the change to this, you're asking people to increase the call rate. You have to have part-timers increase their hours to do the indoor. Saturdays is all combined. There's got to be a solution for non-drivers. There's got to be a reduction in fatigue. We're saying there should be only a maximum of 3 call routes being performed by any individual. So there's a whole range of things which we're forcing and we're determined to agree with Royal Mail.
Well, your point is back to what we all know has happened, which Royal Mail did impose change, and they, worse than that, they incentivised managers through their "It's Our Business to Run" strategy to actually, they paid managers bonuses to get rid of people. It was outrageous, and those people, some of them went straight away. Your Thompsons of this world, the Zarina Browns, the McPhersons, and McDonald, wasn't it, the IR manager? Honestly, dealing with those people, you only had to be in the room with them 5 minutes to know they didn't give a damn about quality of service or their employees. Sadly, that has infected a lot of managers across this company, and we've got to turn that all around. So this is why it's hugely important that we get this right, that the ethos of the company fundamentally shifts back to putting workers at the forefront of everything the company does, and to allowing workers the opportunity to actually serve the customers, which has been denied them with the actions of the previous board. Now the test is also to EP. Are you going to put this right? Now, we couldn't have got a better agreement with EP. I know there will be some concerns, are they asset strippers? But I'd urge the members, to look at that agreement when it comes out, the original deal with the government backing as well, golden share, all of that stuff. This is a much better approach because, frankly, we had to move on from the previous board. The status quo was never sustainable. Now, would they attempt to impose it? I think the problem they've got is it's an absolute disaster. They will kill the company. And the most critical thing, often Royal Mail will say change is the most critical thing. No, the most critical thing is getting employees back on board and giving them the tools to be able to actually do the job that they're paid for and pay them better in the process. If we achieve that, this company's got a future. It will involve change, but we'll be influencing that change. The employees will be having a greater say over that change as well. And, we're confident that we're going to get to that place. It is the ultimate aim. But we know what we need to do. We know from what's happened previously, we know what people are saying, and we're going to try and put that right. Now, I'm going to say, even if we get the agreement, that isn't going to happen immediately overnight. You've got to give people a chance to get this new culture. I don't even like using the word culture because it's so fluffy. Basically, to get managers treating people better in every single workplace, from the top of the business right the way down. There's a new radical governance structure, which we know the current senior management are not keen on, because it gives the union a greater say with EP to advise the company on all the big strategic decisions going forward. So this can be a fresh start. Be a fresh start in the ethos of the company, better treatment of employees locally, better chance to get the job done, better reward for employees, and dealing with change in a way that we need to move forward, but a way that the employees are on board with. That's the real test.
Thank you, Dave. One question for you, Martin, I'll give you a chance to sum up. You know, because you're active on social media, sometimes see you on a Saturday and think, what's Martin putting up now? There will be members, you know, what about Fleet? What about me in engineering? What about Postal Force? This agreement, in terms of it, will cover everyone in Royal Mail Group, I'm
Covers
assuming?
all Royal Mail Group, Chris. So, Fleet, engineers, admin,
Postal Force, yeah.
Parcel Force.
Brilliant, thank you. I guess you've both given a detailed update. I know at 5 o'clock today you're going to be meeting with EP Group, and I know you're going to be meeting and engaging all over the weekend as well. So, conscious of your time, just give you both, Dave, you first, a moment or so, just to give your final message to the members.
Well, I think that we are on the brink of reaching an agreement that will be well received, that will set out the future for a number of years, and that's important that we bring that stability to, you know, the jobs of our members, and that we get the company moving forward in a way that we can all agree with.
Thanks, Dave. Martin?
Look, we're determined to try and get the right agreement, which addresses some of the concerns which have happened, chaos in deliveries, chaos in mail centres, Parcel Force, and, you know, give real good job security. Part of the agreement extends no compulsory redundancies, and we obviously want a decent pay rise, the equalisation journey. There's going to be VR, but the right agreement on basically USO, a performance incentive scheme, reducing reliance on agency, and really trying to improve the working lives of our members.
Thanks, Martin. Thank you to you, Martin. Thank you to you, Dave. Thank you, more importantly, to all of you joining. We're going to have a delivery Pacific session some point next week with Tony Boots, because we saw a lot of delivery questions, so hold fire on them. Tony will pick them all up. But as soon as Dave and Martin and the officers have got an agreement, we'll be bringing back with another session, I guess, and taking any questions you got. But for now, that's everything from us. Take it easy.